Welcome back to everybody for this third episode of our webinar. Today's topic will be questions and questions as social actions. I find this particularly significant because language teachers spend a lot of time on questions, and to some extent, question formats in English are difficult for students to learn. And yet somehow, in all of that focus on the grammar of questions, we're missing something really significant about questions, namely, what are they doing? Why are people asking questions? What is their interactional goal? Okay, I'm just going to jump right into the presentation here. And okay, remember how to do that. Okay, Jane, can you confirm that you're now seeing my slide?
Yes.
Okay. So questioning questions and their replies as social actions. I've used this title before, questioning questions, as an idea to kind of introduce the idea that questions are not just simple things. We as teachers need to look into questions, but equally important, the people participating in interactions, they constantly have to ask why that question. So participants themselves must question questions. Okay, first of all, let's review some of the traditional EFL approaches to teaching questions and answers. Questions. English language textbooks and teachers spend an inordinate amount of teaching time teaching the syntax of English questions and answers. The textbooks almost always group questions according to their grammatical form. First, there are the yes-no polar questions using the present tense form of be. In this unit, students usually also get their first taste of the so-called short answer format replies. Up next are polar questions with present tense forms of do. Sometime later, they get the past tense forms was, were, did. Then come questions using the present perfect, a label which communicates exactly nothing. It's like, what is present about the present perfect? Or what is perfect about it? That is a kind of nonsense grammar label. These are followed by the WH questions with the same auxiliaries. EFL textbooks are all about the grammar of questions. Little or no thought is given to the communicative or socio-interactive functioning of questions. Okay, how do you teach questions? That's our first question. How do you individually teach questions? If you are like most EFL teachers around the world, you have probably, without thinking much about it, been teaching questions through transformation. So think about what that means. How do you teach questions? Probably something like this, as in the colored examples here. Transformational grammar lives on and on. A great many EFL teachers have never heard of Noam Chomsky or his transformational generative grammar. Okay, stop sharing. Come back here. Who has heard of Noam Chomsky? how many cameras on there, so we can really not say, but it's surprising that most teachers have not heard of Noam Chomsky, and yet nevertheless, they are in fact using Noam Chomsky's ideas. Noam Chomsky himself has abandoned his transformational generative grammar of the 1960s, and yet it lives on forever in our EFL textbooks, along with his passive transformation. Okay, back to sharing. So, oh, sorry. So I have to jump back and forth between screens here.
No problem. I think the curriculum has less focus on teaching kids or teaching EFL learners to ask questions.
Okay, I'm having a problem here. It says you can't share your screen.
Oh,
You must grant permissions in order to share screen.
wait, let
And
me,
then I'll just have one button there that says dismiss. Okay, now co-host. Let me see if that solves the problem. Nope. You must grant permissions in order to share screen.
Oh, but you were able to share just a minute ago.
Okay.
Let me.
I mean, I know exactly why, what went wrong here. In the jumping out to the other screen, I clicked a dismiss button here. How do we solve this? Okay, I'm going to have to click dismiss to this because it's the only button I can't. Okay, let's try it again. Present now. Entire screen. I'll get that same one. Okay.
Is it working?
No, it's not. No, it's not. I'm wondering whether I'm going to have to come jump out of the meeting, then jump back in.
Okay.
Because I don't see any way that I can get past this right now.
How did you join this morning?
So joining from the link that Michelle sent.
Oh, okay. That shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the only way I'm going to be able to clear this out, something is like trapped. I'm trapped in a loop here. And I think the only way I'm going to be able to resolve that is going to be to leave the meeting and come back into the meeting.
Okay.
So everybody, can we come back?
Yeah.
So on out, then log back in. Okay. I'll see you in a moment.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. While Dawn is logging out and trying to log back in, I just want to, share my personal opinions about questioning. I think that our students aren't, our curriculum aren't focused on teaching our kids to ask questions, and even college students are afraid of asking questions or don't know how to ask questions in English. And I'm not sure if this is the case for you in a EMI setting. at a college level, are your students able to ask English questions in class when they have questions? No. See? And even for my students, because Don is back. Okay. Yeah, Don, you're muted.
Okay. I hope we didn't lose too many people in that process.
No, I was just chatting, like even for my students, English majors, because we train them to become elementary school English teachers. So
Okay.
one of
Am I still listed as a co-host now?
Okay, let me list you as a co-host. Yes, you are. I think.
Okay.
You are.
Let me try the share function again.
Yeah. So my students, when they get to become English teachers, they need to be able to teach, or and so being able to ask questions, or teaching how to ask.
I mean, to me, this is a core area to say we prepare them regarding the grammar of questions, but we don't prepare student teachers at all for the actual use and, what are questions used for? Mm-hmm. Okay, right.
Yay, hooray.
We're back on track here.
Yep.
Okay. So, a great many EFL teachers have never heard of Noam Chomsky or his transformational generative grammar, TG. Yet a great many of these teachers, and a great many, maybe all, EFL textbooks teach questions through transformation, as if doing some kind of algebra. That is to say, students are presented with a statement and required to transform it into a question. He is a doctor. Is he a doctor? This is often accompanied with little arrows pointing in, like he goes to here, the is goes into turn initial position. She works in a bank. She goes into secondary position. The S is added to an additional do. But we train it, and the textbooks have little exercises where they work through multiple versions of this. But if you think about it, this is essentially having the students turn an answer into a question, which is certainly the wrong way around. The purpose of questions is to find information. Well, one purpose. On the other hand, if we're saying I'm going to start with the information and turn it into a question, that doesn't really make any sense. Yet that's overwhelmingly what textbooks have us do. A better approach is to teach students, as lead learners to learn, how to match the intent of their question with the appropriate format. So here's kind of a quick survey of that. So you have a question about habits. You want to know about something that somebody regularly, frequently, already, or always, and so on does. Well, in that case, use do you. And I always start with you here because it is the most frequent version. There's does he and does she and do they, but ultimately, do you represents probably 90% of these types of questions. There are questions about specific past actions, in which case did you is the appropriate format. There are questions about experience, ever, have you ever. There are questions about already, experience already, have you, so have you eaten lunch? Now, of course, everybody has eaten lunch. So the very meaning here communicates that we're talking about already. Question about ability. Can you? Now, very important here, we're not talking about requests. We're not talking about, can you lend me a pencil? We're talking about abilities. Can you swim for 2 kilometers? Ability. Can you calculate math sums in your head? Ability. About current activities, are you, ing. About informal future, are you going to? About future plans, will you? About obligation, do you have to, need to? And then a sort of A equals B concept. Are you a student? Are you a teacher? Are you sick? There's a kind of A equals B nature to that. Okay. Now the point is, like, obviously you can't teach all of these the same time, but this should be how they're taught. You're starting with the concept, the purpose, and then you introduce a form that goes along with that purpose. Okay. Grammar formation in information questions. Again, what we're doing is reviewing the traditional perspective. In English, the so-called WH questions are formed by combining interrogative words with one of the forms of either the auxiliary verb do, be, have, or one of the modal verbs. These are the English ones we often see. And we say the WH questions because many of them begin with WH. Now, I'd like to point out here, if you ask people, how many WH questions are there? So, oh yeah, maybe half dozen. But once we get to those ones in red, which city, which mall, which food, which sport, then you realize there are an unlimited number of these. Same way with how old, how long, how difficult, how unusual, how spectacular, how complicated. You realize there are also an unlimited number of how plus adjective WH questions. So this is something I think is underrepresented in teaching material. How plus adjectives, how which plus noun. Again, this is usually presented from a purely mechanical perspective, and often again in transformational drills of turning answers into question. He works in a bank. Where does he work? Where we have a kind of replacement, a bank where. The EFL grammar mirror. In most EFL teaching materials, treat responses to questions as a sterile matter of grammar transformation. It is a simple reflection of the grammar and vocabulary of the question. This is not what we normally find in naturally occurring talk. Now, these following three, these are examples of what I like to call a grammar mirror. Where do you live? I live in Tokyo. There's a kind of boring repetition quality. Where do you live? I live in Tokyo. What is your favorite color? My favorite color is blue. Where did you go last weekend? Last weekend I went to my friend's house. You could almost do this without any display of comprehension at all. You're simply echoing back the words. Where do you live? You live, I live in, name of city. Okay. And this is what we normally find in textbooks, and this is what students normally do in class. This is extremely unusual in naturally occurring talk. In fact, it's so unusual that we'd have to ask ourselves, why is he saying it that way? Where do you live? I live in Tokyo. Why all that additional repetition? This is what the person participating in the interaction would be asking themselves. Okay, now here's an activity that we can do. I guess we're going to do it, just each of you can kind of spend some time looking at these. Here we have non-mirrored answers. So on the top in the blue are 9 WH questions, information questions, and at the bottom are possible answers. So spend some time, look at these, and ask yourself, which ones go together? You can no longer use the grammar matching strategy. You can't simply look for the same vocabulary words. You can't look for the same grammar. Instead, you have to look at the meaning and what is being said here. Okay, so let's just take a couple minutes. Take a look at it. Now, it's unfortunate that Google Meets doesn't allow breakout rooms. That would be a great way of dealing with this.
Yeah, I can prepare breakout rooms for you.
Does this work? Will the people in those breakout rooms still be able to see this screen?
No, they won't.
Yeah, okay. That's the problem. They won't have this information to look at anymore.
Okay.
Well, let's just leave it up here. And again, we'll go for a few minutes here, and then I'll come back, and then I'll ask perhaps individual people to, let's see, how we'll do this. So I'll ask a question, ask somebody to raise their hand. You can identify that person, Jane, and then we'll have that person provide that answer.
Okay.
But yeah, take a few more minutes here. I do this in class. I have prepared these on strips of paper, and then I mix them all up so that students have one set of strips of paper that have the questions, another set of these strips of paper that have the possible answers. And as working together as a little group of 3 or 4, they have to match the question with the answer.
So right now we need to match the questions with an answer.
Say that again?
So the task is to match the question with the answer in the bottom, the green.
Well, that's the task. The task is definitely to try to match the 1 through 9 questions with the A through J possible responses. Now, I've tried to make them as distinct as possible, that there's only one from the bottom that can match one from the top. But sometimes somebody will come up with one that seems like an alternate. But yeah, you certainly can't simply match grammar to arrive at a possible answer. So I'll go ahead and read out the questions while people are thinking about this. Who did you go with? How much did it cost you? Where do you live? When are you going to the party? Where did you go last night? Where is the piano concert? How did you get there? And the possible answers to these that are obviously not in the order. Well, I grew up in Southern California. Well, it's supposed to start at 9, I think. Well, my hometown is or was Takamatsu. Well, we started the evening at my friend's house, his apartment. Well, I ended up going alone. Well, I'd planned to take the train, but, well, initially it was scheduled to be held at the city hall. Well, actually, I got a huge discount. Well, I'm more into reading and watching movies. Okay, let me try this. I'm going to escape. Okay, I've copied that and I'm going to paste that now into our chat. So everybody will have that visual information. Okay. Yeah. So that didn't work. Let's try that again.
Perhaps copy the set of questions first and then copy the answers.
Yeah, let's try that. Yeah. One bit at a time. Copy. Okay, that's sort of there. Okay. Let me get the other ones then.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe that'll have to do. We'll see how that is. Let's see. I didn't press enter there. Okay. Let's try this. So how do I want to do this? Well, let's just try this. I'm going to read out a question, and then I'll have somebody try to. That was good. All of those questions are now in order.
Yes,
That's great.
sorry, I was trying to
Okay.
do the answers in order.
Okay, let's try that. I'm going to read out one of the questions, and then anybody, can come in with what you think is a suitable response. Okay. So let's go with that first one. Who did you go with? Anybody have an answer for that one?
Go ahead. Somebody.
Let me try it. I'm not sure, but I think I end up go alone.
Okay. Yep. I think that absolutely. I ended up going alone. Okay, good. Our second question. How much did it cost you? Anybody?
Winnie, please go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Just this question, I can answer the first and second one because I think it's a story. Yeah, a few years ago, I went to the island with my university classmates, and it about cost about $100,000. Yeah, thank you.
I didn't quite follow that.
I didn't quite follow that. I think Winnie answered the questions based on
something else.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at that question again. How much did it cost you?
How about Ching? Perfect. Ching.
Yeah, my answer is, well, actually, I got a huge discount.
Okay, great. Okay, number 3. Where do you live?
You got 2 hands. Go ahead. 曾维珍老师。
So where do you live?
Where do you live? Anyone? Yes. Ching?
Let me see. It should be, well, my hometown is or was Takamachi.
Okay, well said. Okay, yes, that's fine. Okay, number 4. When are you going to the party?
Oh, okay, I would like to answer. Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to the party tonight.
Let's see, is that?
A better one will be, well, it's supposed to start at 9, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the one. Well, it's supposed to start at 9, I think. Yeah, that sounds like the perfect answer.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the next one then. Where did you go last night?
Professor Wu,
Number 5.
where did you go last night?
Well, we started the evening at my friend's house, his apartment.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay, that works. Very simple question, one we hear all the time. Where are you from?
Well, I grew up in Southern California.
Okay, good. Okay, I hear that question all the time myself, and it's really problematic. It's even more problematic for my children. My daughter was born in Kuwait. Then she started her schooling in Oman. Then we moved to Mexico. Then we moved to Japan, and she went to Japanese schools. Then when she was 16, I had a sabbatical in the US, and we moved to the US at that time. And people are asking, where are you from? And so that's who knows what the answer to that is. Okay, so where are you from? Well, I grew up in Southern California, is at least the answer I can give. Okay, what type of sports do you prefer?
Well, I'm more into reading and watching movies.
Okay, great. Where is your piano concert?
Professor Hu, you wanted to give
Yeah.
that a try?
Yeah, I'm looking at the list right now.
It's kind of
Not
confusing
easy.
the way it's kind of
Okay,
all together.
okay. It's a H. Well, initially it was scheduled to be held at the City Hall.
Okay, excellent, excellent. How did you get there?
Well, I had planned to take the train, but
Okay, great. Now, what's interesting to me about these is it really forces the students to deal with the vocabulary involved, and it forces them to think of how questions and answers might possibly go together instead of their usual process of just saying this grammar article. Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing the screen. Okay, hold a second. Yeah, okay, that should work. Okay. Right. Okay, now we're going to look at, again, the textbook version, replies to polar questions. So, are you American? Yes, I am. No, I'm not. The format as presented in EFL textbooks begins with either yes or a no token, followed by a clause consisting of a subject, usually a pronoun or there, plus repetition of the question's auxiliary or modal verb, mirroring the tense of the question. The polarity of the verb matches the turn initial token. Actually, there's no reason even to talk too much about that. We all know this. It's like, have you been to Egypt? Yes, I have. No, I haven't. Do you live in Taiwan? Yes, I do. No, I don't. These kind of things. They are in every single textbook on the planet. It is the default way of teaching short answers. However, at the bottom of this page, bottom of this slide, the short answer format is deeply problematic and rarely found in naturally occurring interaction, as we shall see later. In fact, I personally go as far as saying it is grammatically wrong. If we understand grammar to mean a grammar for interaction, then short format questions or replies are grammatically wrong. They do not fit the grammar of interaction, and we should stop teaching them immediately. We'll find out later why, what's wrong, what's so wrong with them. Okay, but what are questions doing in conversation? With all this focus on the grammar of questions, EFL textbooks and syllabi seem to lose sight of the much more significant matter of what questions are actually doing in interaction. For participants in the interaction, there's always the interpretive issue of why some particular question in that particular form was done at this particular time. So why that now? In conversation analysis, we're often looking at those three questions said in a separate way. Why? What are you doing with that? That, what exactly you said in that particular form, and now. So in this case, why have you asked that particular question at this particular time? A little kind of invented example in the bottom there. Do you want to get something to eat? Sure. What do you have in mind? I don't know. What time is it? So what time is it is indexing various things like what restaurants might still be open at this time. Are they closed in the middle of the day? Various sorts of reasons for why what time is it is used at this particular moment. Okay, so this is a very important quote by two leading conversation analysts. Even though information or confirmation may be part of what a question is built to get, this seems to be virtually never what questioning and interaction is centrally about. So questions are not about getting information. That it's not centrally what they are about. So turns which assume the grammatical format of questions regularly serve as vehicles for other social actions. So I like this graphic, sort of the image of the truck carrying around these different types of vehicles. So in this case, we have, for example, a WH question with why. And then we could say, well, that's fine. That's the grammar structure. But now we have to ask ourselves, what is the social action being performed via that grammar structure? So it is the social actions that are important. So here, grammar formats are being used as vehicles for other social actions. And not all questioning actions take the grammatical form stereotypically associated with questions. That is, we can have something heard as a question, even though it doesn't use question grammar. Okay, and once again, we'll take a little break here and say, think of some questions that are primarily hearable as doing some other social action. Type them in the chat. I'll give you a few minutes. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now. So again, what are some questions that are primarily hearable as doing some other social action? And I'll ask you to type those in the chat. Okay, so
Are there any hints?
questions that aren't questions. Did that show up?
Questions
Yeah, okay.
that aren't questions,
Questions that aren't questions.
but are for.
Okay, let me give just like a really bold, a really obvious kind of example. But there's actually lots of them. But the most obvious one is like, okay, can I borrow your pen? This is boldly, obviously not a question. It's a request. Okay, so what other kind of questions? They have the grammar of a question, but they are not primarily doing asking for an answer. Now, if we think back of our sequence organization, we had question answer. Now, that's not a grammatical shaped question and a answer shaped next turn. We are talking about question as a request for information and answer as a providing that information. But these are ones you say it's not. Okay, so would you mind if I sit here? Yep, absolutely. Of course, that's also a request. Is this seat taken? This is also a request. How about something else, something that's not a request? Can I ask for sick leave? Now, this is a request, it's a special kind of request. In this case, a request for permission. So we have request formats typically take either can you do something for me, or can I, which is asking for permission. Can I visit your office? I don't know who he is. It's a statement, but it's not actually a grammar question. It doesn't have, so I don't know who he is, doesn't have the grammatical shape of a question. And that's what we're looking for. Things that have the grammatical shape of a question, but they are not doing questioning. By the way, I often do this. In Japan, this means no. I don't know. What is that? Does that communicate across cultures? But I was thinking, no.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So even if you can lose your life, do you want to try it? To me, that's still a question. Like you really want to know the answer to that. Although we might learn to rhetorical question. Well, okay. Rhetorical questions are a category of question. It's nice weather, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, that still has the grammar of a question with the isn't it? Yeah. May I go to the bathroom? Still is asking for permission. So a type of request for permission. There's lots more. Isn't this a good movie? Okay, I think that's a good example. So what is that, by the way? Let me change the isn't this. Let me change it just a bit to make it a bit more obvious. Isn't this a great movie? What social action is that? It is not a question. Okay, that's a good one. How dare you? But let's come back to that. Isn't this a great movie? It's not a question. What am I doing with that?
It's a statement.
A statement is just a grammar form.
Okay.
What's a social action it's doing? It may be trying to initiate small talk. Well, let's say, what social action is it?
What social action is it?
So think of it as like a
Praising? No.
Well, let's say if I say that is a great movie, what is that?
That is a great movie.
If we think back of our adjacency pairs, then we have it's an assessment. It's an assessment. It's an opinion in a kind of short way. So, isn't that a great movie? Is an opinion. Okay. Let's see, what else have we got there? Is there a pen? Is there a pen that I can borrow? That's interesting, because there's sort of two questions involved there. Like one, is there a pen? Second, can I borrow it? Still a kind of request format. Okay. Okay, I'm going to jump now back to the presentation.
How about how dare you? What is that?
How dare you? How dare you? Expressing outrage. Expressing indignation. Okay, but it's certainly not asking for an answer, right? How dare you? Well, I dare because certainly we wouldn't do that. Okay, let's do the entire screen. Allow. Okay, back to the presentation. Okay, right, here are some. And again, I'll give you a couple minutes to think about what are these social actions. Have you ever seen, now what we're looking for is two things. One, what is the social action? What is the name that we could call the social action that A is doing? And then B, and then the second part is what sort of response would B suitably do in response? So we have you ever seen such a beautiful sunset? Would you like to come to a party? Why weren't you at work yesterday? Are you an idiot? Aren't we going to be late? Are you going to eat that? Isn't he just the cutest thing? I think we can all immediately say that no, these are not questions. So what are they? Think for a moment. Let's just think about these, look at them and think about them. So when we think about the name for the social action, naming things can be difficult. I suppose some of the terms that we get from speech act theory come into play here, others not so clearly. So let's take the second one as an example of that. Would you like to come to a party? What is the name of the social action being done?
Invitation.
Okay, right. So invite, invitation. Okay, now how about for those others? Can we think of a name that would be suitable?
So
The third one, why weren't you at work yesterday? The suspicion.
Is it just suspicion? Let me say it in a slightly different way. Why weren't you at work yesterday?
Accusation.
Yeah, accusation, or a sort of alternate way of maybe describing the same thing would be a complaint. So accusation or complaint. And in fact, a great number of these why questions actually do come across as complaining. Why didn't you? Why weren't you? We, in fact, quite regularly hear those as doing complaining instead of questioning. Okay. Okay, that's great. How about another one? How about that first one?
that's
Wow, have you ever seen such a beautiful sunset?
assessment.
Okay, assessment, that's an opinion again, assessment. Yeah. How about,
Laoshi,
yeah.
go ahead. Wei Zhen, Laoshi, go ahead. You're not mute. You need to unmute yourself.
I think that would be the confirm, right? Confirmation is
Oh,
like a
which-
confirm that what is.
right,
I
which-
was talking about number one.
Okay, have you ever seen, but the thing as a whole, the complete item definitely functions as an assessment. And as an assessment, if we think back of the sequence organization, where we have an opinion makes relevant an opinion, a first pair part assessment makes relevant a second pair part assessment. So in some ways, what you've said is correct. It is seeking agreement. But I think as a whole, we can say it's doing the job of assessing the sunset. Okay, how about those other ones? We have, are you an idiot? Aren't we going to be late? Are you going to eat that? Isn't he just the cutest thing? You can take those in any order.
He just the cutest thing is also assessment or like praise.
The last one, isn't he just the cutest thing?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's clearly an assessment.
Someone raised their hand. Please just take the mic and, go ahead and jump in.
Yeah. Aren't we going to be late? Aren't
guess
we
you
going to
can
be
just-
late? Yeah, but aren't we going to be late?
Disagreeing? Aren't we going to be late? No.
Could be. I mean, depending. Now, one problem I have here is I have these in isolation. Of course, they would never be in isolation in actual talk. There'd be talk that went before each of these that would help provide the context for them.
I think the unwavering.
Well, how about my tone? Let's say, let me again say it and see if you can listen to my tone as I'm saying it as a clue. Aren't we going to be late?
It's complaint.
Yeah, I think it also comes across as complaining. Okay, how about the "Are you an idiot"?
That's a statement.
A statement of fact.
Statement of fact.
Okay.
Instead
Well,
of
as
saying
a
you're an
statement of
idiot,
fact.
are you an idiot?
So, as a statement of fact, how would you take this? How would you receive it if this was addressed to you?
Mad. Being called an idiot.
Are you an idiot?
How do you
It's a criticism.
Okay.
You are disagreeing with the person.
Oh, yeah, actually, I mean, it could be functioning like that. Somebody has said something and you say, "Are you an idiot?" means you entirely disagree with what they've said. Okay. I think
That's
that's
right.
entirely possible. So
Yeah,
good,
yeah.
good response there. Okay. And the easiest one here, and easy one. Are you going to eat that?
Request.
Request. Okay. Right. So now let's come back and say, what are the actual, how would you respond? If you were given this, what's a likely response? So now we have to say, what we need to do is not to match the grammar, but we need to match the social actions. So have you ever seen such a, well, I'm going to save that one. That's hard. We'll start with number 2. Would you like to come to a party? What could B say? Would you like to come to a party?
Sure, when's the party?
Sure. Okay. Sure wins the party. Okay, is a possibility, but certainly the sure. Sure is a good beginning there. Okay.
You're
So
talking
yeah, so
about-
we have an invitation and accept. Okay. How about the next one then? Why weren't you at work yesterday? Complaint.
I was sick.
Okay. An account. Now, in fact, there are several second pair parts to a complaint, but giving an account a reason is one of them. Although it's not the only one. So imagine this is your boss. Why weren't you at work yesterday? He's complaining. Besides explaining, what could you do?
Say sorry.
Okay, what is that?
Sorry, because I had a car accident yesterday.
Okay, well, that's now combining the two. So what action, what social action is sorry?
Apology.
Apology. Okay, so apologizing. So in fact, we have here apology together with an account as being a common response to this. Okay, just because I want to move on, let's go to that top one here. Sometimes people have difficulty with, have you ever seen such a beautiful sunset?
Request for agreement.
Okay, so give me a possible agreement there. Have you ever seen such a beautiful sunset?
This is the most beautiful one I've ever seen.
Okay, I like that. That's good. Somebody else try one.
Can I say yes? It's amazing.
No.
Okay. Yes.
No.
Have you ever seen? Now, this is where we get some funny problems. So, yes is a disagreeing thing with this.
No. It should say
So,
no.
Yeah, the no is what you have to say. Have you ever seen such a beautiful sunset? No,
No.
this is the most beautiful one I've ever seen. But if you say yes, it's like, yeah, lots of times. So yes, sort of dismissing it. So this is one my students never get. It's kind of a tricky one. Have you ever? You should be answering no
No.
if you want to agree. And that's kind of counterintuitive. Okay, good. Let's move on here.
I want to know how to respond to, are you an idiot?
Yeah, that's right. So, first of all, I do think it depends a lot on, for example, if the turn before that was a suggestion to do something. Let's try that out. So, for example, so I think we should bring, let's see.
Would it be like, no, press this? And
I'm,
then,
I'm trying to
"No,
think of a
again,
really
again,
bad.
press
I'm
this."
trying to think of a really bad proposal for a beach barbecue. So let's see. I think we should bring our laptop computer to the beach barbecue. Are you an idiot? What might B say? I think we should bring our laptops to the beach barbecue.
And then I would
Are
say,
you an idiot?
Disagreement.
Yeah, but what did B is going to say next? So you imagine you're in this dialogue. B says, I think we should bring our laptops to the beach barbecue. A responds with, are you an idiot? B, what are you going to say?
Well, we can listen to the music while barbecuing.
Okay. So like why it's maybe not an idiotic suggestion. So I do think we can't really provide a suitable answer there without knowing what went before that.
but my question is, would we say no and then give it a reason, or
Well, that's a
would we-
good, let's say no or yes. Let me think about that. Are you an idiot? Yes. Are you an idiot? Now, here we'll kind of get to this later, but there are actually three types of possible responses to a polar question. There is a yes response, there is a no response, and there's what is called a non-type conforming response, that is not a yes and not a no. So responding without a yes or a no, which is almost certainly what would happen in this case. So it would not be prefaced with yes or no.
Okay,
And we'll talk about that a little later today.
thank you.
Okay, I see we've actually come up to our first, it's actually already 10 o'clock for you. So let's go ahead and take our break. We'll come back at 10:10 for you
Yes.
and 10:11 for 11:10 for me. Okay, we'll go ahead and take our break now. Okay, and we're back.
Welcome back.
Okay, I realize I've got so much more information to cover. I may have to move at a little faster pace here. So, I'm just looking at something here. Okay, I'm going to go quickly into the presentation. Let me check. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at, for the rest of the day, really, most of the rest of the day, question design versus question formation. Question formation suggests that it is a grammatical issue, that we simply use the structures of English to create questions. Question design suggests a different idea, the idea that participants in interactions custom design a question to suit the specific moment in the interaction. So the questions are creatively and intelligently designed rather than just formed. Okay, first of all, we can take a look at some basic facts about questions. So looking at naturally occurring interaction, Tanya Stivers, one of the leading people in conversation analysis at UCLA, she looked at the occurrence of different question types. So overwhelmingly, we start with polar questions. That represents the lion's share of questions found in interaction. Then 27% are the Q words, that is question word type questions, formats. And then 3% is the alternative. Alternative is kind of unknown, but what that basically means is, do you want coffee or tea? Do you want cake or cookies? So where you have two possible alternatives are given. Now, in that case, I find that students have a difficult time with these. They answer either yes or no. Okay, so overwhelmingly, polar is the most common type of question. And then of the Q word questions, Stiver gives a breakdown of what she found. So 38% are what questions, 23% are how, 16% are why, 12% are when, 8% are who, and only 3%, 8% is where, and only 3% were who questions. So this gives us a starting point. Now, conversation analysts traditionally have not done numbers. They have not done statistics. But more recently, people are looking at this as a first step. So we can say, as a first step, we can observe that polar questions are the most common. That's great. That's a great initial observation. Now, from the conversation analyst point of view, we now have to ask, why is that the case? Why did it turn out in interaction that polar questions are more common? Okay, so alternative questions, X or Y. There are three basic question types: typological speaking in English, information questions, polar questions, and alternative questions. For some reason, many EFL learners seem to have a hard time with alternative questions, which they tend to answer with yes or no, instead of selecting one of the alternatives. So would you like coffee or tea? The proper type of answer would be coffee or tea. But they hear the yes-no formatting and provide a yes or a no. So would you like coffee or tea? Yes. Typical EFL student response. Note that sometimes the two alternatives are separated by a silence. This can be analyzed as B withholding talk at the point of first possible completion after coffee, resulting in a silence. This may serve as a warning to A of an upcoming dispreferred action, namely rejection of the offer of coffee, which prompts A to produce an alternative offering. So here we see how preference organization is coming into these question designs. Would you like coffee or tea? Actually, two versions of that. Would you like coffee or tea? With the period, by the way, the full stop in CA transcription is not just sentence punctuation. A full stop in CA transcription means falling intonation. So I would have to read that. Would you like coffee or tea? Falling intonation. The second version of that, move something a bit. Would you like coffee or tea? Suggests that there might actually even be a third alternative to that. Would you like coffee or tea? Or maybe Coke. Okay. So these are alternative style questions. We don't tend to teach these too much. They don't occur in the textbooks very often. Okay, tag questions. Stivers, again in that same 2010 paper, states that tag questions were rarely found in her data, comprising only 6% of polar questions. Furthermore, 77% of those tag questions employed a simple lexical tag, right? Or huh? Rather than the more complex clausal formats taught in EFL textbooks. So yeah, we spend a lot of time getting students to try to produce the correct format. Like, he is a doctor, isn't he? They have a bicycle, don't they? And it's really tough. Well, here's the fact. 70% of those just go, right? In which case we don't need that grammar at all. Throw it out. Don't waste your students' time teaching them that type of grammar. Because 77% of the time we just go, he has a bicycle, huh? And that's all we need. The tag can be produced with either final rising or final falling intonation, despite the textbook characterization of them always having rising intonation. So given that the tag is regularly produced in both ways, what is the interactional difference? He's arriving at 8, isn't he? He's arriving at 8, isn't he? We have those two possibilities, and then we would have to look at in which ways they are different. And since that comes up later, I won't stop at this moment and talk about that. Okay. So you often hear that the Japanese final particle ne has no equivalent in English. So like nani nani ne, you're a teacher ne, you're from America ne. This is a very common particle that we hear in Japanese. And there are a lot of versions, ne, na. Does Chinese have anything like that?
Not that I'm not sure. Perhaps
a one word, one item that you put at the end, let's perhaps similar to the English, huh? Not bad for free, huh?
perhaps in Taiwanese we do, right? Taiwanese.
What would you do in Taiwanese?
I'm not good at Taiwanese. Anyone in the audience?
Okay, I'm gonna demonstrate.
Okay.
Like this thing is really delicious, right? And then you would say, "Oh, this meat 真正好吃哦."
Oh, maybe a hall. Okay, hall being the thing. Okay, let me hear that whole thing
Great
again. Please.
example.
Yeah, let me hear it again, please.
What, you want me to do it again?
Yes, please.
Oh, 这真正有够好吃的哦.
Okay, good. Okay, so that final thing, that's the tag. Not bad for free, huh? Okay, so we can ask, well, what's it doing? Well, it's certainly not a question. It's not asking for agreement. It is primarily involved with like getting the other person to become involved. Okay, so like all questions, tag questions don't merely ask questions. I have to move that out of the way. They are also pressed into service in pursuit of other social actions. They are subject to the why, that, now inspection. What do you feel is going on in the following instance? Is it a tag question or something else? That's kind of a lot for breakfast, don't you think? No, I think it's great. First of all, first question, is that a tag question? From a traditional EFL standpoint.
Perhaps not, right? That's kind of a lot for breakfast, don't you?
Okay, so first of all, just that, again, that from a grammar standpoint, is that a tag question?
From a grammar standpoint, it is. Is it?
That's kind of a lot for breakfast.
Don't you think? A question.
What would be the formal tag question we would teach in an EFL textbook? That's kind of a lot. Let me shorten that down. That's a lot for breakfast. What would we teach students? 2 words.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, that would be the one. We'd use the is from that's. That's kind of a lot for breakfast, isn't it? But instead we have don't you think, which is actually quite different. So this is not actually a tag question. It's functioning in a simple location. But how about that? What action do you think don't you think is doing?
Asking for agreeing or disagree.
How do you think Jess feels about that? What's Jess's opinion about that amount of breakfast?
It's a lot.
And so a lot. Okay, what sort of attitude does he have or she have towards that? It's a lot, but is that this a lot or is it that a lot?
That's too much.
Yeah, that's a negative assessment. That is too much for breakfast. And as a negative assessment, we can call that a complaint. And then Mike then responds disagreeing with that. Okay, let's move on here. Okay, next type of question that we often find that are almost entirely missing. Some questions are built to appear as extensions of the prior Turnet talk. They are grammatically parasitic. These are referred to as appender questions. So we have Ingrid saying, I know it's just too hard, but like it's too hard. And then there's some little intervening talk, but Mandy comes in to be friends or to be more than friends as the appender to that. Let's take a look, a simpler example at the bottom. A says, I went shopping. B appends for shoes. So think of that together forms one term. I went shopping for shoes. I went shopping for shoes. I went shopping yesterday. I went shopping with your friend. I went shopping at the big mall. So there are many ways that we could append a piece of a turn to that and extend it into a question. So I have never seen an EFL textbook that teaches appender questions as a strategy for producing questions, although it seemed to be quite a simple and productive method. I've certainly done this with my students, and they have no problems at all producing these type of questions. Okay. Questions as vehicles for social actions. It turns out that a very great number of questions and conversations, perhaps most, serve as vehicles for other actions, and it is the social action which determines what sort of response is relevant. Some turns of talk which assume the grammatical shape of questions will be heard by participants first and foremost as invitations, other questions as requests, other questions as complaints, other questions as assessments or compliments, still other questions as part of pre-sequences or insert sequences, and so on. As such, these first pair part actions call for something other than an answer. Even a seemingly neutral question as when does the shop close might be heard by a tardy friend as a mild rebuke and elicit response such as, don't worry, we have plenty of time, rather than the provision of a time. From the perspective of conversation analysts looking at data, the syntactic formatting of a turn talk is of secondary importance to the co-participants' displayed understanding of the action it performs. Okay, I'll just briefly put this up. Stivers 2010 did look at what sort of social actions were being done by different types of questions. Requests were frequently done as polar questions or WH questions. We don't really have time to go through all this. And if you are interested in this, I strongly recommend the Stivers 2010 article. I have that in a little reference section at the end. Okay, questions that are not primarily doing questioning. Quick sort of review here. Fairly obvious, common speech acts. Invitations, offers. Do you want to? Would you like to? Do you feel like? Do you want me to? Those are quite easily hearable as doing inviting instead of being a question. Students, however, have been trained to respond to these as questions. Do you want to? Yes, I do. No, I don't, which is entirely inappropriate. Requests. Can you, could you, would you mind? Can I, could I, would you mind if I? As request formats. Complaints. Why can't I? Why didn't you? Now let's talk for a minute about this example and how it's important to have the CA, really the SSJ-CA approach to this. There was an analyst who was looking at looking at question answer formats or questions and answering in Native American interaction. And she was particularly looking at one particular tribal grouping, and her data was coming from a tribal meeting, a public tribal meeting where tribal leaders were up on a stage and the audience then would say addressed questions at them. One of those questions was, why can't we fish from this bridge? And that was answered with complete silence. That is, no reply was given. And the analyst then went on to state that in this culture of this particular tribal culture of Native Americans, it was not important to provide an answer immediately following a question. So that was her analysis of the culture. So certainly in Western English culture, a question requires an immediate answer. But she said this is not true of all cultures. It is not true of this Native American culture. Here's an example. But now if we think about it a different way, why can't we fish from the bridge? It's not a question. It's a complaint. It's a complaint to a politician. What would be the response to a complaint to a politician in a Western context? Well, in that case, I think silence would be a very common complaint or common response. So in that sense, interpreting, let's say, analyzing the item as a question led this researcher to come to a false conclusion. If instead she had understood it as a complaint, then she would have come up with a different analysis. Okay, now to the not so obvious ones, because these are not speech acts as we traditionally think of them, but interactional practices. So pre-invitations. Are you busy? What are you doing? Are you free? Do you like? Have you? These type of items are quite regularly. Have you seen the new James Bond movie? You know, have you seen the new Harry Potter movie? These are the kind of questions that regularly go, they go before invitations, but more accurately, they prepare for a possible invitation. Now, as proficient users of a language, we hear these as pre-invitations. Our students tend not to hear them as pre-invitations. They tend to hear them as questions, and they answer them as questions. So, what are you doing at 8 o'clock tonight? I'm going to do homework. Well, that will cut off the possible invitation. Pre-requests. Are you busy? What are you doing? Do you know how to? Have you ever? So, have you ever upgraded your operating system? Do you have a camera? These type of items. Hold on a second. I have to take a little drink of green tea. Okay. And we had the pre-announcement formats. Did you hear the news? Did you hear who? Do you know what? Do you know who, what, where, when? And we had our pre-pre's. Can I ask you a question? Could I ask you a question? Could you do me a favor? Could you help me? Okay. Next article that I strongly recommend, if you can get your hands on, Hayano 2013. This is basically a review of question design in conversation. What I'll be going through now is basically a summary of his article. Okay, so do turns of talk get heard? How do turns of talk get heard as questions? We naively think of questions as being identifiable by their grammar and/or prosody. That's certainly how EFL textbooks present questions. However, detailed study of talk and interaction in numerous language demonstrates that grammar and prosody are frequently not reliable as markers that a particular turn of talk will be heard and responded to as doing questioning. At the very core of questioning lies a recipient-tilted epistemic, that's a hard word, a recipient-tilted epistemic asymmetry, fancy words, which in simpler term means that the recipient, that is recipient of the question, has been assumed to have fuller information. That is, you ask questions to people that you assume can answer. In this excerpt, the interviewer, IR, asks no question, but the talk nevertheless occasions an answer by the interviewee, i.e. So in a very brief word, David Owen, you in no way you in no way regret what you did, or despite what has happened in Brighton this week in the Labour Party. No, in no way do I reject it. Okay, so there is an answer to a question that wasn't asked. You in no way regret what you did. It is not formatted as a question. It doesn't have question grammar, and it doesn't have question intonation. Yet, nevertheless, it is heard as a questioning action and receives an answer. Okay, so how do turns of talk get heard at questions? This type of epistemic asymmetry can even make a why or how come interrogative unnecessary in prompting an account, as in the following excerpt. Participant A produces a statement. So your line's been busy. That is your telephone line. Your line's been busy. However, the reason lies within B's purview, and thus she answers, provides a reason for a question that has not been asked. So your line's been busy, statement, observation. Yeah, my father's wife called me, so she calls me. I always talk for a long time because she can afford it and I can't. Okay, so your line's been busy is a statement and an occasion, an answer for a question that wasn't specifically asked. Once again, we see that it is the epistemic asymmetry that is primarily responsible for allowing the prior turn of talk to be heard as doing questioning. So I think A could have said, why was your line busy? And gotten the same kind of answer. But we don't need that grammatically formatted question to get the answer. Okay, this brings us to something that CA has been calling an epistemic gradient. The term epistemic refers to states of knowledge. In terms of doing questioning, we can think of these states of knowledge existing on a continuum or as a gradient. The steeper the slope, the greater the epistemic asymmetry. Consider these three versions of somewhat the same question. Number one, who did you talk to? Number two, did you talk to John? Number three, you talked to John, didn't you? And number four, you talked to John? So all of those basically are seeking the same type of information. But number one, who did you talk to, has the greatest imbalance in the epistemic states. That is, in question number one, the knower has a far greater level of knowledge compared with the questioner. On the other hand, in question four, you talk to John, the imbalance in epistemic states is much smaller. So which question format you choose is related to the epistemic states that you hold relative to the person you're asking the question to. I know that can be sort of complicated sounding. It's sort of a complicated way of describing what is ultimately kind of a simple thing. Okay, let's move on here to presuppositions. Questions embed presuppositions. The question, where did you eat, quite obviously presupposes both that the recipient has in fact already eaten and that the eating was done elsewhere. Sometimes the presuppositions can be more subtle, objectionable, or insidious. These embedded presuppositions can present a problem. Answers face a choice between A, providing a relevant answer and accepting the presuppositions, or B, bringing the presuppositions to the surface of the interaction, rejecting them but not answering the question, and thus potentially being heard as evasive. In such cases, the recipient may need to employ a range of interactional practices to navigate these troubled waters. Okay. Now, unfortunately, there's simply not enough time to give examples of each of these things, but we'll try to work through it as best we can. So last weekend, we talked about preference organization. But now we can take that further and say preference organization will influence the design of polar questions. So we have seen that preference organization plays a significant role in the formatting of second pair part actions and sequences as a whole. We have also noted that certain first pair parts can be dispreferred, such as requests. It is less obvious, however, that preference organization is often implicit in the design of questions and questions as vehicles for other social actions, such that the formatting of a question can embed a preference for the type of response it seeks to engender. So this has been documented quite well in preference organization. So how I make my polar question will suggest whether I would like to receive a yes or whether I would like to receive a no. And that preference then will influence how that yes or no is provided. Okay, so these empirical studies of naturally occurring conversational data have identified constructions that normally embed a preference for an aligning yes response, as well as those formats preferring an aligning no response. Okay, let's go back for a moment and remind ourselves that preference doesn't mean that you like to do it. Preference is not a personal preference. Preference is a systematic structural organization within the language where yes is unmarked and no is marked. So in this case, if you have a polar question that prefers yes, a yes response will be formatted in the unmarked way. On the other hand, if you receive a no response, that is the dispreferred response, that no will likely be formatted in that marked way that we saw for the dispreferring responses. So in more formal linguistics, this phenomena has been studied under the rubric of polarity. So positive polarity items, negative polarity items. Okay, so the following formats embed a preference for a positive or affiliating response, which is to say they seek to elicit a positive response. So positively formatted straight interrogative. Have you heard from her? Yes is what you want to hear. And if it's not yes, the no will be done in that hedged sort of way. Positive statement plus negative tag. You've heard from her, haven't you? Yes is what you are hoping to receive. Positively formatted declarative questions. You heard from her? You are expecting to hear the yes. Now I think I'm not going to read the format in red. That just kind of sounds complicated, but let's review those preferred question formats. Have you heard from her? You've heard from her, haven't you? You heard from her. Those are the preferred question formats. Now are the ones that are the dispreferred. That is, they want to get the negative response. You haven't heard from her. No, that's what you want. You haven't heard from her, have you? No, that's what you want to hear. You haven't ever heard from her. No. You haven't heard from her yet. No. You haven't heard from her at all. No. You haven't had any response from her. No. Okay. And the negative adverbs. You haven't really heard from her. No. You haven't seriously heard from her. No. Okay. I've taught these, by the way, with students, just with a card matching game. So I have cards that have these questions on it. Have you heard from her? And on the back, I have yep and nope. And they play the game they have all the questions up, facing up. And all the yep and nope are on the bottom of the card. And then a student has to touch one of the cards and then has to make a guess of yep or nope. And then they turn the card over. If they have the correct response, they leave it up, or they can even take that one out of the game. And then the next person picks one of the questions, selects yep or nope. And after several times of doing that, the students do in fact know which type of answer is preferred for each type of question. Okay, so reversing polarity in search of a preferred action. One demonstration of the relevance of preference in polar question design is that when a preferred response seems to be in the offing, as displayed, for example, by silence, a questioner can reverse the polarity of the question in hopes of eliciting an affiliating response, as in this example. Now, this is actually talking about a fire station. So a fire department, and people kind of cook there. So A says, do they have a good cook there? Silence. Nothing special. So do they have a good cook there is formatted to prefer a yes response. But the silence suggests possible trouble. B or A speaks again with nothing special. The nothing is a negative polarity item, and it now prefers a negative response, which is what it gets. No is the preferred agreeing response in the preferred turn format with the no right at the beginning of the turn. Remember, the preferred turn format, the action occurs at the beginning. In a dispreferred turn format, the negative action occurs at the end or not at all. Okay, so let's look back at A's first turn there. Did they have a good cook there? Yeah, no, not particularly. Could have been the type of response formatted in the dispreferred turn format. But instead, after hearing that first initial warning sign, A jumps in with a reversal of the polarity. Okay, given how much time and energy is devoted to questions in EFL materials, it would be worthwhile for teachers and textbook writers to learn more about how questions are actually handled in real-world interaction. So there's a lot to learn here. For outstanding overviews of CA research on question design, see Stivers 2002 and Hayano 2013. So these two papers together provide a very fundamental, I would consider them the primary fundamental reading for anybody who is going to be a teacher in the future. They provide the fundamental structure and use of grammar and questions in English. Okay, how to discourage questions in class. Well, that's kind of a sarcastic label there, but how many times in class have you asked the following question and gotten no response? Does anyone have any questions? Ironically, the negative polarity, anyone and any of this formulation, embeds a preference for a negative response. You're as much as telling students that you don't want them to ask any questions. In contrast, the same basic question formatted with positive polarity embeds a preference for a positive response, that is, asking questions. Does someone have a question? Embeds the question for, encourages people to speak. Does anyone have any questions? Says, don't talk. Okay. I'm going to skip over this other than briefly mention the idea of entitlement with requests. You can say, are you entitled to have your request granted, or is that entitlement in question? So people looked at data in Swedish, Danish, and English, and they've looked at various request formats and what kind of entitlement those suggest. Let's just look at the English one at the bottom. Can you and could you suggest that you are entitled and it is non-contingent? That is, you can expect to get your request fulfilled. On the other hand, I wonder if is not entitled and may be contingent on other conditions. Okay. So doing questioning is much more than grammar. I think in all of this, we can look back to the very beginning and say the very simple textbook EFL type of teaching grammar or teaching question as grammatical formats does not serve our language learners. It does them a great disservice. Okay. Now I'm going to move on to designing responses. We've talked about formatting questions. Now we need to talk about formatting responses to questions. Okay. And we're already coming up on our second break. I would like to, if you don't mind, press right through to go through this last couple of hours together. What do you think? Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. Can we skip this break?
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else?
Second.
Anybody second? Second
Anybody
that?
second?
Now, of course, everybody is free to take a break anytime. Okay. I mean, it's like if you need to go to get a drink, you need to go get a drink. Anyway, I'd like to press forward with this. Okay, so the first type of response we need to look at is the difference between phrasal response and sentential response. So teachers often insist that students answer questions using a full sentence. Please answer with a complete sentence. I can't tell you how many times I've said that myself and wagged my finger at the students and seen other teachers do this. Please answer with a complete sentence. The pedagogic purpose being to drill some grammatical structure. However, CA research reveals that unmarked, or in CA parlance, preferred or canonical or default response to W8 questions are typically packaged as lexical or phrasal units. That is to say, not as full sentences, not as clauses. These lexical or phrasal responses align with the presupposition and relevancies of the question. In other words, they treat the question as unproblematic. Phrasal question treats the question as unproblematic. In the following example of a preferred phrasal response, note that the response is provided immediately with no gap upon the completion of the question, as is typical of the preferred turn format described by Pomerantz. How far up the canyon are you? 10 miles. How far up the canyon are you? 10 miles. Okay, Jane, do that one with me. I'll ask the question, and right on time, you give me 10 miles. So how far up the canyon do you live? So
10 miles.
How far up the canyon are you?
10 miles.
Okay, good. And that's exactly what we want. It answers the question. It answers it in the shortest possible way. It answers it with no gap, on time, right at the beginning of the turn. Okay, so that should be the default format that we allow our learners to do. So, how old are you? How old are you? 20.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the kind of response that we should. What's your favorite color? Blue. Okay, so those are the kind of ones that we should be allowing. Let's see. Do we have some? How about Jane? Why don't you do that with some other participants there? Ask them some of these very common, easy, like, where do you live? Where do you live? What's your favorite sport? What's your favorite food? These kind of simple things we often ask students. Why don't you ask some of the other people, participants here?
So so what I'll do is, okay, I'll start with Professor Wu, since your camera's on.
Okay.
What's your favorite food?
Chocolate.
Okay.
That's great. So
Okay, good. Let's do another one.
yeah, Professor Wu, would you like to ask someone else? Who is available to answer the questions? 曾老师. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah, Professor Wu, go ahead and ask teacher Zheng Weizhenlaos.
What color do you like?
Blue.
Okay, good. Now let's just stop right there. Say that's great. That's just the kind of response that we tell students not to do.
Yeah.
We're always saying, you know, my favorite color is blue, or I like blue. And I say, in fact, that's an unusual response, as we'll find on the next slide here. So the phrasal is the default answer. It treats the question as unproblematic. Clausal responses, however, sentential responses, clausal, I mean, it has a verb in it. Full sentential response suggests some type of misalignment with the presuppositions of the questions. Now, this one here, by the way, I actually experienced this one myself, personally. So I was on the train, the Shinkansen here in Japan, and I saw another foreigner. And as foreigners always ask each other, where are you from? There was slight hesitation, and it was, I live in New Zealand. Well, right away, it's like my CA mind was thinking about that. It's like, that's the essential response. The phrasal response would be, where are you from? New Zealand. Where are you from? New Zealand. So I'm now asking myself, like participants ask themselves, why did he answer in a full sentential response? So minor troubles can still be displayed through phrasal responses through various delays and hedges. However, sentential responses display more significant trouble, are less frequent. Notice that, are less frequent. We don't find them as often. Now in CA, when anything is less frequent, we normally then have to say, why is it less frequent? So there's no doubt that rejection is less frequent than acceptance. But that doesn't mean that people like to reject less, but it means there's social reasons that they're avoiding rejection. Okay, so now we have to say, why are sentential responses less frequent? Okay, and incorporate delays and prefaces. In short, lexical and phrasal responses provide a no problem answer, while a sentential link answer suggests disaffiliation towards the presuppositions of the questions. So now we can come back to, where are you from? I live in New Zealand. What is the problem there? Okay. So full sentential response suggests some type of misalignment with the presuppositions. As further talk revealed, R was actually born in Pakistan, but had immigrated to New Zealand with his family as a very young child. His full sentential response resists his perception, not mine necessarily, but resists his perception of an embedded presupposition that the formulation, where are you from, is tied to ethnic identity. So he didn't identify as a New Zealander. So he himself was suggesting that the where are you from presupposes that is your ethnicity, the answer to that. And he was being resistant to that presupposition. Okay, do other people hear it that same way? Where are you from? I live in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, say, well, there's something else there. Like, okay, yeah, you live there, but, and then there's that. So there's that idea. The full sentential responses are doing something else. Now, by the way, there's something else that they're sometimes doing in talk with English teachers. So English teachers will often use a full sentential response to a student to, in fact, embed a grammatical correction in the students, like, where do you from? I am from New Zealand. See what's being done there? The student has made a grammatical mistake, and the teacher has used the full sentential response to correct the grammar. Let's even change that a little bit, make it a little more obvious. Where does he from? He is from New Zealand. Okay. Right. So let's then move on from that. So that's our first sort of thing. Phrasal responses are and phrasal can also include a single word. So where are you from? Greece. Okay. What's your favorite color? Blue. Okay. So a single phrase, or like from New Zealand. Where's the book? In the office. So phrasal. Okay. Pomerantz in a 2017 paper also examined responses to question where the response looks deeper. So the response, she examines question answer sequences in which the reply does more than just answer the literal question. Instead, the response addresses the inferred reason behind this question. This practice reflects nicely the why this now challenge, constantly facing the recipient of a question. So this little bit of phone conversation. Jerry, responds, say, how are you? Okay. Did you just hear me pull up? So they're on the phone for this. Did you just hear me pull up? So in breath, no, I was trying you all day. The line was busy like for hours. Okay, Shirley provides a reason as to why, from Jerry's perspective, as indicated by her inclusion of just, this phone call came immediately after she returned home. Okay, let me back up there a little bit. Say, did you just hear me pull up? The just suggests that somehow Shirley, that's the S-H-I, Shirley knows that she just arrived. And then Shirley provides the answer to that, no, that she didn't hear her pull up. She has been trying to call all day and the phone was busy for hours. Okay, on the bottom there is an activity here I do with students. It's quite a good activity. It's worth try it out yourselves. Even like try it out with your college students, try it out with your student teachers, try it out with your fellow professors. So I have a student go up and ask a question or write a question on the board. It could be any question. Write a question on the board. So let's say, why did you come home at 3? Why did you come home at 3? Or is that your book? Or absolutely anything. And then there's a why. And then I have the student, another student, look at that question and try to infer a possible reason for why that question was done. And you get all kinds of really interesting responses there. And those responses lead to a lot of interesting discussion with your students. And I think it's really well worth doing. Obviously, this is something you're doing with adult learners and not in this elementary school classrooms. But again, in teacher training sessions, you could easily do this to get teachers to understand what are questions doing. Okay, let's practice one of those here. Let's have Jane start. I'm going to pick Jane because, you give a question and then there's a why and somebody else imagine that you're answering that why question. So Jane, we'll start with you. Give a question.
Let me think of a question. Any question?
Any question at all. It can be any of a WH question, a polar question, any question at all.
Did you get that notebook from the mall?
Okay, say that again.
Did you get that notebook from the mall?
Okay, and then why? And now let's have somebody else provide the explanation. What might A say for explaining why the question was there? So the question was, did you get that notebook from the mall? Why? Or why do you ask?
Anyone?
Yeah, anyone there?
I thought you lost it.
Okay, say that again.
I thought you lost your notebook.
Oh, well, see, this is the thing. This is A and A. It's the same person.
Oh, the same.
So A is being asked, why have you asked that question? So A asks the question, and then A explains why they asked the question. Now, by the way, I've confused that because here I actually have a different student provide the answer because I think it forces them to look at the question more deeply. But in this case, let's try it with just Jane first. Only Jane. Okay, so I'll be A or you be A. I'll give the why do you ask, and you give that. So let's try that. So again, your question.
Did you get that notebook from the mall?
Why do you ask?
Because I got the same one.
Okay, okay, good, good. Right, now let's try that, but now it'll be somebody else providing that explanation.
Okay.
Okay, so again, Jane, do a question, do something different.
Something different.
Question. Different question.
Is that burger from Burger King?
Why do you ask? Okay, now somebody else.
Someone else? Is
Yeah,
that burger from Burger King?
Yeah, but that's the account then. Why do you ask? And that's the explanation. So is that burger from Burger King? Why do you ask?
Oh,
Because I just saw you came out from Burger King.
Okay, okay, good. Let's do one more. How about that same person? You provide the question.
You mean me?
Yeah.
yes.
Jan, you look like 20 years old.
And now let's see, is that really a question? Jane, you look like, well, that's not a question. That's a statement, actually.
All right, that's a statement.
Okay, it's got to be a question.
I was like, really? Thank you.
Okay, get that question in there.
What you?
Go ahead.
It was funny, huh?
No, you just reverse it to a question.
Yeah. So we're gonna go back to the same question again.
So it could be a WH question or a polar question, any kind of question.
It's completely blocked.
No, you could turn that original statement into a question.
So actually, maybe we can forget that one. Let's just start a question with when. Start a question with when.
Are you 20 years old? What?
So let's go a question with when.
Okay.
When? When did you go to the restroom?
Why do you ask? Why do you ask?
Because I gotta go.
Okay. Okay.
I need to take a break.
Okay. Okay. Right. Let's move on. Do we actually need to take a break here? Okay. Let's move on here. So some replies don't actually directly answer the question. They answer what is taken to be the reason for the question. Okay, so now we are crafting responses. Now, like this, a crafting, building, carefully designing a response to polar question instead of just using this grammar format of the short answers. Okay, so a great many polar questions are actually doing something other than questioning. So it's obvious from the fact that 70% of the question in Cyber's data were built as polar questions. An inquiry such as, do you like pizza, is rarely oriented to as a neutral question about likes and dislikes, as is typical in beginning units of EFL textbooks. I hate that. I just absolutely hate that. Unit 1, likes and dislikes. Do you like hamburgers? Do you like pizzas? And then there's one of these grid type information gap activities with student A and student B. Does Bob like hamburgers? Yes, he does. No, he doesn't. That is just the most ridiculous, useless language I can think of. And it desensitizes to the students to the reality that do you like is regularly a pre-invitation or pre-offer. Okay, so instead, proficient language users will likely hear this as initiating a pre-invitation sequence, making relevant a go-ahead. You like pizza? I love it. Or blocking move. Do you like pizza? Yeah, not that much. Notice, by the way, not that much suggests is it like positive, not that much, but totally it means the opposite. Or a hedge response, like, yeah, why? Okay, a little bit of both. In fact, the design of responses to polar questions is much more interesting and much more varied and much more important than the the unnatural and problematic response formats taught in EFL textbooks. Okay, so what sort of responses do we get? Okay, a question makes relevant an answer. We know that. Not responding at all to a question, that is responding with a silence, as many Japanese students do, as many EFL students do, may be socially or interactionally sanctionable act. So if I simply respond with, what time is it? And that's the response I get, you'll probably be angry. So it is not a interactionally acceptable response to not respond to an answer. So furthermore, there is a demonstrated preference in conversational data for answers over non-answer responses. So I think, what's a non-answer response? You're answering, but you're not answering. So which respond without actually answering. Stivers 2010 found non-answer responses occurring in fewer than 20% of the hundreds of question sequences she examined. So not only are answers hugely more frequent, they are also provided much more quickly. So the example at the bottom there, but does the train go on the boat? Oh, I have no idea. She hasn't said. So it's an answer that doesn't answer the question.
Sorry to interrupt. I think we're still on the previous slide, right? Slides are not advanced.
So she's speaking.
Yes.
I say so. Not answering is not speaking. A non-answer speaks, but does not provide the information that the question seeks. So, does the train go on the boat? Wants to know, is there a yes or no response to the train passing onto the boat? And instead of giving a yes or no, responds with the, I have no idea, she hasn't said. So actually we have two things there. I don't know, and then why don't I know? She hasn't said. Okay, then we have standalone yes or no responses. Can you go? Yes. Standalone yes can sound curt and may shut down the sequence. Similarly, Ford showed that co-potential regularly withheld talk following a standalone no response, and that this silence often prompted an expansion of the no response. In other words, a standalone no is treated as an insufficient response. Something like, did you study last night? No. I had to work. So there's a no and then silence. That is, the silence is nobody else is responding to you. And so the same person comes back and fills in more information there. EFL learners frequently respond with only yes or no. When pressed, they tend to minimally expand their yes or no with the stock short answer formats Yes, I do. Yes, no, I don't. Yes, I did. No, I didn't. Yes, I have. No, I haven't. These are the ones we've taught them. I mean, think about it. The short format doesn't provide any additional information. Did you go to the movies last night? Yes, I did. What does yes, I did do that yes doesn't already do? So that's a question we'd have to ask. As we saw in the section above on question design, polar questions can embed a preference for the type of response it seeks. In this light, both yes and no can be preferred responses, or they can both be dispreferred responses. If they are preferred, the turn will usually assume the characteristic preferred turn shape. If dispreferred, then the turn, as well as the sequence, may include various delays and hedges with yes or no occurring late in the turn or never. Okay, so now we come to fundamental research carried out by Jeffrey Raymond in 2003 on type conforming versus non-type conforming responses. Research has also demonstrated a further fundamental form of preference in response to polar questions. Raymond called responses prefaced with either yes or no tokens. By yes tokens, it means like yeah, nah, nah, all of the kind of variations on those. Type conforming responses. So did you go to the movies? Yes, no. Both of those would be type conforming. In that the design of the polar question sets up an expectation for one of these two response tokens. Type conforming responses accept the presuppositions of the questions. Raymond found that type conforming responses follow the typical design of preferred turns, as in the following instance from a health visitor interview with a new mother. So this comes from a body of data collected in the UK, where you have a health visitor who came to visit new mothers in their homes and carried out an interview with them. So one of the common questions on the interview was, how about your breasts? Have they settled down now with the new mothers? So how about your breasts? Have they settled down now? Yeah, they have now. They have now, yeah. Yeah, so we have the type conforming response. Have they settled down? Yeah, right in the beginning. Yeah, they have now. Yeah. Okay. So does everybody see that that is a type conforming preferred format? So yes, right at the beginning with no gap. Have they settled down? Yeah. Have they settled down? Yeah. On time, short. Have they settled down? Yeah. Okay. In contrast, Raymond also found numerous instances of non-type conforming responses in which a response to a polar question was not prefaced by either yes or no. His analysis demonstrated that non-type conforming responses are dispreferred and indicate a problem with the presupposition of the questions. So again, from one of those health interviews, are your breasts all right? Silence. They're fine now. I've stopped leaking. So somehow suggesting, well, they're not all right. Now that's the presupposition of that question. Your breasts all right? I'm assuming they are. So yeah, I'm sort of like, yeah, now, yes, but not now. So it is rejecting the presupposition that the breasts are right all now. They're fine now. I've stopped leaking, but there are perhaps other problems. Mom's non-type conforming response resists the presupposition there was never any problem. Non-type conforming responses are typically entirely missing from EFL textbooks. We don't even give students the option of omitting a turn initial yes or no. We maybe insist you must answer with a yes or no. But there are times that a non-type conforming response may be the correct thing. And it's quite interesting to try to think of how can you design an activity that will encourage a non-type conforming response. It has to be something where they would reject the premise of the question. Let me see if I can think of something just like that. It's very hard, very hard. I can't think of something right now. It's very hard to come up with a question that you could say both yes and no sound wrong. And so you might come up with something like, well, anybody have something there?
No, not really.
Yeah, I've come up with some in the past, but I can't think of any right now. Okay, so we'll move on. So I recently produced, a couple of years ago actually, did a conference presentation based on an analysis of polar questions in naturally occurring data on the occurrence and non-occurrence of short answer format replies. So these short answer, yes, I do, no, I don't, yes, I have, no, I haven't, yes, I can, no, I can't. Looking for those in naturally occurring data. In short, they don't occur. Found in virtually every EFL textbook the world over, the so-called short answers are treated as bread and butter grammar and the default format responding to polar questions. The following examines the occurrence and more significantly, the non-occurrence of this format in naturally occurring L1 English speaker conversations. They are in fact phone conversations. One immediate observation is that short answers are rare. They are extremely rare. And from a CA perspective, rarity is often an initial indication that a practice is interactionally marked, which is to say it does some special work. This raises several interesting questions. If short answers are not common, what is found in their stead? When the short answer format is used, what does the short answer format accomplish that the far more common standalone yes or no would not? So again, what does yes, I do accomplish that yes doesn't? And that's a question that the CA analyst would seek to answer. Okay. First, we have various types of responses. So type conforming responses generally accept the presupposition and constraints. These occur in 75 to 80% of question sequences. Non-type conforming responses resist the presupposition and constraints and frame the question as problematic. We have repetitional responses that repeat words in the question and display greater agency relative to type conforming responses. We'll have examples of these later. Marked confirmation, turn initial tokens such as oh and absolutely can attest to the relevance of asking the question. Responding with of course can entirely reject one alternative. Transformational responses display even more resistance by shifting some aspect of the presuppositions of the questions. Okay, so let's look at what I found in this data. The data is a classic set of 1960s telephone calls between two elderly sisters. These are called the Newport Beach calls because they took place between the two sisters who lived in Newport Beach, California. Today, you can actually get these calls. You can have the actual audio and the transcript from TalkBank as CLAN files from which Word doc files were created. So the calls were retrieved from TalkBank as CLAN files, and then I produced Word doc files from these. There are a total of 25 calls, which together yielded 25 pages of transcript. And this gave 120 pages of transcript. And this produced 120 candidate polar question sequences. Okay, so let's start looking at the analysis. Short answer format. So these are the instances that I found. These are the only, well, one. I found one. In 120 pages of transcript, I found only one instance of a short answer format. Did you get your paper this morning? Yes, dear, I did. That's it. That is the only one. And then there's a little of a repetition there. Well, thank you. Yes, I did. Okay. And that was the yes version. To find a no one, I actually had to go to another conversation entirely. Did your mom tell you I called the other? No, she didn't. Okay, and we'll come back to that later. Like, what's the no she, what's the she didn't part doing? Okay, so first, what did I find? If the short formats are gone, what did I find? Okay, so here's the repetitional type response. Is Cliff down? That is, did he come down to visit like Los Angeles by any chance? Is Brown down? Yeah, he's down. That's he's here. Yeah, he's down. So yeah, plus the repetitional word down. Oh, maybe, or optional there, and yeah, plus more. So yeah, plus more. That's what we should be teaching students. Oh, you went in Thursday night? Yeah, Earl had some stuff for working on pictures, so I had to go up there and get in. You work Thursday too? Yeah, Thursday night I went home. Okay, was it nice? Oh yeah, the turkey was delicious. Let's see, you gonna fix the thing for Thanksgiving anyway? Why, sure, I'm gonna fix the turkey. I'm getting it thawed out. So in all of these cases, there's a yeah token followed by more information. This is what we should be encouraging learners to be doing. And we have a few of these. Yeah, sure I do. Do you know how to get to Disneyland? Oh, sure I do. So somehow that is certainly stronger than yes, I do. Then we have the standalone yes. So, had your breakfast? Yeah, a little laugh token. You're lucky. Are you down for 2 weeks? Yeah. Let's see. What's the question there? I have to look through that one. Do you think I ought to get 2 boxes? Yeah. Yes. You go out Sunday night, Lynn? Yeah. So short answer, standalone, yes. Yeah is also used as a news mark. Can we? So in response to those, can we? Yeah. Okay, I have to skip over. There's kind of a lot of stuff to cover in our remaining time, but newspark is the short one-word response to things like can we, do you? So can we? Yeah. Do you? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay, type confirming no tokens. Let's see, you up at grandma's? Yeah. Or sorry, are you up at grandma's? No. So type conforming, this is the preferred response. So the no occurs right at the beginning of the response. Let's see, this is the swimming pool enclosed in the glass bit. Let's see, sorry. Yeah, is this the swimming pool enclosed in the glass bit? No, it's outside. Okay. Y'all back together again? No, I'm going to give it to him anyway. Okay, that has to do with somebody's relationship, girlfriend, boyfriend. Are you all back together again? Oh, no, but I'm going to give it to him anyway. Okay, no plus more. Again, this is something I insist on with my university learners. Yes plus more or no plus no. No plus more. One common no plus more format is the correct information. Do you live in Tokyo? No, I live in Takamatsu. Do you like sports? No, I prefer reading. So at least no plus something. Okay, now these are quite long, so I think again I'm going to skip over them, but we had yes plus no plus more and no plus more. So no plus correction, no plus more information. Okay, so come back to the no plus correction. Yep, at grandma's? No, I'm at the beach. No plus more. Do you have to go to the hospital? No, I just had a deal. Let's see. I just had a local deal and wasn't any fun, but I'm better. I'm lying on the couch out in front. Okay, standalone, no. That is no all by itself, nothing else in the turn. Following a news mark, don't you? No. Okay. Type conforming, non-type conforming responses. So again, that the breast one example, we've gone through that already, so I'll skip over that. Okay, so non-answer answers, the I don't know. So you're going to be with her? I don't know. Think you'd like to go? I don't know. O plus non-type conforming response. Well prefaced response. Well, by the way, generally suggests that something lengthy is going to follow. Well doesn't go with a short sort of response. You coming down early? Well, I got a lot of things to do before I get cleared up tomorrow. I don't know, I probably won't be too early. So well suggests a lot of talk following. Okay, it's non-type conforming following a news receipt. Did you? I really did, though. These friends of mine, yeah. Okay, polar questions for other social actions. A polar question as a response to a request. As a reply to an invitation. As a reply to an offer. So polar question is doing other social actions. And these are a couple odds and ends, items that I happen to find. I say, well, it costs money every time you got to go out on the boat. Oh, it sure does. Now there we have, oh, it sure does. Now that's certainly a very strong agreement with the opinion stated in line 80. So it sure does is certainly doing strong agreement there. Now this next one comes from an old movie from the 1950s, but it's interesting. And that is a person would add this yes sort of response at the end of their own turn. If I was as pretty as Barbara, you know what I'd do? I'd stop her from ruining Pete's life. Yes, I would. So it's the same person providing the response. So I would do it. Yes, I would. I would go. Yes, I would, which is a little bit unusual usage. Okay, here's a real example of this. This comes from the Conan and Bryan show, which some of you may know. He's talking supposedly backstage with one of his assistants. And Conan says, "Are you a fan of my comedy?" And the assistant says, "I am." Short response, silence. Conan responds to that like, "It's just, I'm sorry. It's just not like, wow, yes, you meant a lot to me as a kid." You did. and then the silence. Now, I wish I could play the video. Jane, this doesn't allow playing video. Is that right?
Well,
Google Meet?
Sure you can. Is it on YouTube or something?
No, that's part within the presentation. It's not on YouTube, but yeah. Anyway, I won't be able to do that, but you can see when you play the video that Conan is very unhappy with these short responses. That are you a fan of my comedy? Sure, I love your comedy. That's what he's expecting. Instead, he's getting these very curt sort of short answers. I am. And in fact, non-type conforming even. So there's not yes, I am, just I am, followed by a 2-second silence. That is 2 seconds that the assistant isn't speaking, and 2 seconds that Conan, if you see him in the video, he's got a very unhappy expression on his face through that 2 seconds. And then he's saying what he was expecting to hear. Like, why is he giving that facial expression? It's just, I'm sorry. It's not like, wow, yes, you meant a lot to me as a kid. You did. Another short, non-type conforming short answers. At that point, Conan just kind of looks at the camera and does this sort of gesture with his hands. So quite clearly, short answers do not make people happy. Short answers produce perhaps a negative type of response. And that brings us back to our one negative response I got here. We looked at what are short answers doing. So did you get your paper this morning? Yes, I did. Perhaps it's a kind of condescending answer like, yes, in fact, I did. It's doing the additional thing of pushing home the point. And the negative one, did your mom tell you I called the other? No, she didn't. That one is quite hearably negative. In fact, we see that. So in the next turn, no, she didn't. In line 105 or line 05, we have a silence. And then B, which is Bonnie, comes back with, well, I called. Showing that she is debating the idea that she maybe didn't call. So the no, she didn't is being heard by B as negative. And already we've got an interesting idea that negative short format questions, in fact, are heard negatively. Okay. I need to come back to something here. Okay, let's come back for a moment to what's wrong with short answer, particularly no, I don't. No, I don't is a negative, no, I don't is a dispreferred action. But no, I don't is formatted with the preferred turn format. So notice the kind of cross purposes there. So disagreeing. So do you want to go to the movies? No, I don't. That is a rejection, which is a dispreferred action. But no, I don't is a preferred turn format. So the format doesn't fit the action. And this is why I call these, they are grammatically wrong. The formatting, the grammatical formatting of the response does not fit the social action. So from my perspective, it is grammatically wrong. I wouldn't say, yes, that's correct, but I would just say it's grammatically wrong. Okay. Okay, so conclusion. The results of the analysis of the Newport Beach calls demonstrate that far from being the default method of responding to polar questions, the so-called short answer format is exceedingly rare. I only found one in 120 pages of transcription. Furthermore, when it is employed, it appears to be doing specific interactional work. And in that sense, it is a marked response type. For example, following an invitation, a positive short answer sounds stilted. Do you want to go to the movies? Yes, I do. Sounds uncomfortable. And a negative short answer is hearably rude or curt. Do you want to go to the movies? No, I don't. No student should ever respond like that, since the formatting runs counter to the dispreferred turn shape. Even as a response to a question, a short answer could come off as sounding, well, short. It's a phrase, by the way, I've used in the title of my paper. Might not be clear to everybody. Don't be short. Has everyone heard that expression? Don't be short with me. Have you heard that?
No, not probably not.
So don't be short means angry, or
Oh,
don't talk to me in that rude way. So to me, that is a perfect sort of thing. We'll say, when you use these short answers, the negative short answers, you are being short. So do you want to go to the movies? No, I don't. You want some coffee? No, I don't. You are being rude and abusive and dismissive. So here's the funny thing. Given the rarity of such short answer formats and its marked nature, should teaching short answer grammar really be given such pride of place in our EFL textbooks and classroom? I think the obvious answer to that is no. We should stop immediately teaching and presenting short answer responses to polar questions. They do not occur. The yes short answers sound awkward. Yes, I do. Yes, I have, instead of yes plus more information. Or even, for example, something like, yes, that sounds great. And the no formats, so no formats are rude and abrupt, curt, dismissive. So why should we not teach it? So we should not teach them because they're rare. We should not teach them because the yes short answer is awkward. We should not teach the negative short answers because they are abrupt, dismissive, and rude. So 3 reasons to skip that part of your textbook. Okay. So why do questions and their responses matter? Depending on such factors as how questions are designed, who is asking them, and the social and sequential context within which they are asked, questions bring about diverse interactional consequences. In fact, questions are a powerful tool to control interaction. They pressure recipients for responses, impose presuppositions, agendas, and preference, and implement various initiating actions. So using questions effectively for a full range of interactional purposes is a vital conversational skill. Okay, EFL materials in most cases fail to go beyond the grammar of question formats. For example, textbooks after textbook present do you like in unit about random likes and dislikes instead of as pre-sequences. Preference organization extends into the design of both questions and the replies and needs to be incorporated in the teaching of conversation. Preferred unmarked format for replies, information, questions is lexical or phrasal rather than full sentential, which does the additional work of displaying problems. This needs to be reflected in EFL material. So for textbook writers and teachers writing dialogues and writing materials, we've got to accept short answers like, what's your favorite color? Blue, as acceptable. Okay. Very quickly here, I'll mention a couple of textbooks if you're interested in further. After this, we're going to go into a Q&A, which is only suitable after a whole 3 hours about questions. Recommended books on CA. If you want to learn more about conversation analysis, particular SSJ conversation analysis, I strongly recommend these 3. The first one with the blue cover, Conversation Analysis and Second Language Pedagogy by Jean Wong and Hansung Jung Waring. This gives a fantastic overview of all of the observations that we have made so far about conversation. There's a recent edition. The first edition was 2010, and now there's a 2020 edition. That's the one that's shown here with the blue covers. So I strongly recommend this. It's written for EFL, ESL teachers, explaining in terms that they can understand what we have observed. Many of the things that I've commented on in my presentation come from this book, so I strongly recommend this one. The next book on sequence organization by Emmanuel Shagloff. This is the man. This is the #1 researcher in conversation analysis, one of the small number of gods of the CA field. And what he says is the straightest information you can possibly get. However, he is not an easy writer to read. And what he provides is the greatest detail that you could ever hope for in analyzing the sequences. So imagine if you're taking a chemistry class. You have your introduction to chemistry textbook, and it's about that thick. Well, his book is only like that, but still, this is the nuts and bolts of how interaction works. So it is really the most detailed analysis you could possibly hope for. When I teach the master's course in conversation analysis, these two textbooks are the required courses, the blue book and the red book. The white book, the Handbook of Conversation Analysis, you've perhaps seen these type of handbooks before. There's a very thick book, and it's a compendium of perhaps 30 or so articles that represent the state of the art of conversation analytic research. This is 2013, but definitely worth getting. It's expensive. It's perhaps worth convincing your library, your university library, to buy a copy. It may be something like $150. But if you've got a research budget, buy one. If you can get the university library to buy one, get them to buy one. But it is, think of all the top researchers looking at all the most relevant topics, everything we've discussed so far comes from this. And in fact, the Hayano article on research on response designs comes in fact from this book. So I definitely recommend those three. There's another couple books that are also relevant. Applying Conversation Analysis. This is more on the idea of applying conversation to the study of classroom interaction. So if you're interested in classroom interaction, the Applying Conversation Analysis, many of those papers are doing exactly that. And then there's Interaction and Grammar that looks at the interface between interaction and a grammar for interaction. Then there's another book by Wong and Waring on storytelling in multilingual interaction. So how do multilingual speakers include storytelling in their conversation? And then there's another book by Numa Marquis that this is an introduction to doing conversation analysis. So if you want to say, how can I do conversation analysis? Marquis' book is a good introduction for that. Okay, and there's those selected references. Perhaps while I leave those on the screen, let's go, well, let's see. I need to come back where I can see chat, so I'm going to have to stop sharing. Okay, so I'm going to find some way to put this PowerPoint online so that you will later be able to look at all these slides at your leisure. I know it's quite annoying to say, here are all the selected references, but you can't look at them. I will somehow put those up so that everybody can see them. Let's spend our last 10 minutes here with questions and answers. So you can either unmute and ask me something, or you can type some question that you have about this topic of questions and replies from the CA perspective. So,
Well, I'm gonna start with questions I have. So I think this is an interesting, topic of, providing us with information that we're all doing it wrong. And yeah.
or rather that the mainstream body of EFL publishers have told you, have sold you a certain package of this is what English is like, and it's not like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And about not teaching no, I don't, or because it sounds rude and it's rare. What are some of the suggestions that we?
Okay, now, well, first of all, we have to come back to say, what was the first pair part? Now, in the example I gave, the first pair part was, in fact, an invitation. So what's the second pair part to an invitation? So
receive an invitation or reject,
accept.
An
So now we have to think is, we're not giving a no, we're not giving an answer, we're giving an accept. So how do we do an accepting of an invitation? And there, the most common format that we've identified from CA is something like sure, yeah, plus a comment, usually something like sounds great or that'd be good. That is the most common format, absolutely, following an invitation. So instead of teaching no, I don't, following an invitation, we'd want to have something like, well, just the sort of dispreferred format, like, let's do that. So invite me, Jane, do you want to go to the movies?
Do you want to go to the movies, Don?
Yeah. A movie? Yeah. What kind of movie?
Okay.
What kind of movie?
Marvel's movie.
Oh boy, yeah, I don't care for those too much. So all those same things we practiced last time as part of the dispreferred turn format, that's what we would be using, those signal warning signs instead.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what I've done there is I've produced all those. Now, if no, I don't, in response to a question, so let's say a simple question like, do you have a bicycle?
Yes, I
Okay,
do.
try that one then.
Do you have a bicycle?
It's not a very good one, but yeah, I guess so. So now I'm kind of thinking, well, why are you asking me that? If you're asking me, do you have a bicycle because you want to borrow my bicycle? Now, how I format my turn will reflect the sense of, do I want to let you borrow it, or do I want to block you from asking to borrow it? Okay, so it really depends what the previous action is doing. So we just need to be aware that it isn't like all those polar questions are not doing the same action. And how we format the negative answer depends on what kind of social action should be in that second position.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Another question. Students are often, there's always a lesson on what is this and what is that. And when do we actually use what is this and what is that, and what is that intention? Like,
okay. Let's see, what is this? So first of all, every Japanese student on the planet starts out with, this is a pin.
That's right. Taiwanese
this
too.
Is a pin. Now, I've got to tell you kind of like a joke, but I'll have to tell part of it in Japanese and I'll explain. That as my son and I went down to the southern part of the island and we went into a small antique store. And when the elderly owner of the antique store saw us, she said, "Ah, this is a pen, Gakita," which translates as, "This is a pen came." This is a pen kind of people came. And it's the people who speak English have come. This is a pen people have come. Okay, so it's so strongly identified. And I say, well, the reason for that, this is a pen, is quite simple. It's a grammatical structure. This is a subject, is a filler for a verb, as an article, pen is a noun, subject, verb, article, noun, and then you can fill in with, let's say, the car, let's say, that is a house. What is this? This is a pen. This is, now, there's in fact no possible situation where you'd ever say, well, this is a pen. It's like, it would never occur. You're like, yeah, what is this? This is a boy. And can you think of any context where that would be a suitable response?
No. So should we skip this lesson altogether?
It's like, but what is that is a possible thing. Like you think you're in a shop or you're asking, I mean, it has the sense of saying, you don't know what that thing is called in the foreign language. Like, what is that? It's a pen. But maybe you can simply replace it. What's that called? Might be getting more to what's that called in English. Okay. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Thank you for the answers.
Yeah, okay. Yep. Someone else? Comment. By the way, it doesn't have to be a question. It could be a comment. Like, how do you feel about all of this stuff we've been talking about?
Yeah, questions or comments?
Hey, Don, I got one question. And this is Clark from...
Yeah.
Yeah, you know me already.
Okay.
And after I watched these two sessions, because I didn't participate in the first one.
Okay.
All right. These youngsters, the young people nowadays, they kind of speak with the question type of format. They always raise that the tone at the end of every sentence.
Oh yeah, but
right?
This is, first of all, there's actually whole dialects of English that do that. Like there's an article that's been published on called "Ending Up in Ulster," and that is, Ulster is a city in Ireland, and they say, "I went to the club with my mates and we had a beer, and then we went home and watched telly," and every single statement.
Yeah. So what do you think was that when you are conducting the conversation analysis?
Well, first of all, you'd have to recognize that within that speech community, that is the norm. So within a conversation, the conversation analyst is not trying not to take an outside perspective, but rather an emic perspective, how do participants themselves? And if you find that within that interaction, participants treat those things as statements, then they are statements.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you are from Ulster, interacting with somebody from Ulster, you will not treat those as questions. This is also very common in Southern California, almost like surfer dialect.
Yeah,
California.
That's effect.
Yeah. And so people typically do not respond to those as question formats.
Mm.
Yeah, but you're entirely correct. That has become a very, very common thing in American English. Yeah, that's a good observation. I must admit, I've been out of the U.S. so long that it somewhat annoys me when I hear that, where somebody with every single statement has that little tail on the end of it. But when I go back to the U.S., that is when I go back to Southern California, that is what I hear. Okay. Now somebody else, or even another one from Professor Hugh.
Yeah, Professor Wu.
Ooh, yeah. So Anything from anybody?
I would just, I would like to say something about the short answer. I was quite surprised. I never heard it's kind of expression for rudeness. If I have the answer shortly.
For which
You
one?
know,
Say that.
I mean, the short answer. You
Oh,
just
yeah.
mentioned the short answer. We supposed not to teach this short answer format in class.
Yeah, well, and again, very strange to think. I looked at all of this real conversation and I simply didn't find it. Now, it could be that that particular body of data wasn't the relevant body of data. Perhaps maybe if I had looked at police interviews, maybe in police interviews or doctor-patient interviews, possibly I would have found more of these short answer formats.
Yeah.
But even there, I mean, we have the patient interview, health interview. We found that they're not used there. So it is a problem because not only are they in the textbook, but standardized tests require students to know these.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, what do we do about that? They say we have to teach it, but we know as a fact that they don't match with what happens in reality.
Yes, but in the classroom, we still need to tell them, right? We need to tell them in reality, it happens not this way. But in the test, we have to say, yes, you have to answer this way.
Yeah, well, I would say you don't have to answer this way. I would teach them how to answer with the suitably socially correct sort of response. But then after I've taught them that, after I teach them the, so I think it isn't that they don't occur. Short answers do occur, but they are a marked form. So like anything else in our teaching, we don't teach a marked form first. We teach a marked form after we teach a unmarked form.
Okay.
So same thing goes here. Like, are there contexts where you might want to use the direct forms? Well, certainly there are. I mean, one, in informal responses, in casual talk with your buddies, you might very well use these sort of marked formats and nobody really cares.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's always a challenge, though. I mean, it's sort of like, this is what you're supposed to teach. This is what's in the textbook. This is what's in on the test. But we know it's wrong. There's quite a lot of that in EFL.
Yeah, so that's why it's important that we have this conversational analysis webinar. Thank you so much.
And I think this is simply a matter of saying, as long as we as teacher become aware of this, we can then think of times, or when can we slip it in to our classroom?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, finally, next week will be the time where we really finally get to the matter of how can we ourselves maybe do some of this. If we want to do classroom observations, how can we do it? How do we set up the cameras? How do we work with transcriptions, the real mechanics, the nuts and bolts of doing CA? And even the big question of, is it the relevant methodology for doing classroom observation? Okay, and that's what I think maybe a lot of people wanted that. And that's what we're going to do next time. So hope to see everybody for that. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Signing off till next week.
Dr. Don Carroll.
And to all the participants. Right back at you.
Thank you all for joining. We'll see you next week.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Please